They said the air itself was poison. That to breathe was to invite death. Can you imagine that fear? The invisible enemy, everywhere, inescapable. And so, while the healthy sealed their doors and the wealthy fled to the country, a brave few chose to walk directly into the pestilence. They weren't miracle workers. Let's be clear. Their cures were often rooted in superstition, their medical knowledge scant by today's standards. But here's the thing. They were the only ones who didn't turn away. This isn't just about doctors. This is the story of the unsung heroes of the Black Death, the forgotten figures who faced humanity's darkest hour armed with nothing but raw courage. In October 1347, a single merchant fleet slipped into the Sicilian port of Messina. The men on board were already dying, black buboes blooming beneath their arms and groins. Within a week, the city's notaries were scratching names into death registers faster than ink could dry. From Messina, the sickness rode carts, riverboats, and wagon trains northward. A relentless tide of despair, reaching Paris by midsummer 1348 and the lowland villages of Norway before the first snow. Contemporary chroniclers wrote of fields untilled, cows unmilked, and entire hamlets where the only sound was the church bell tolling itself hoarse. The Black Death was one of the most fatal pandemics in human history, estimated to have killed as many as 50 million people, perhaps 50% of Europe's 14th century population. Some cities, like Florence, saw their population plummet from 110,000 to 50,000 residents, while Hamburg and Bremen lost 60 to 70% of their inhabitants. No one understood germs. They blamed corrupted air, planetary alignment, or divine fury. The miasma theory, believing that disease spread through bad air, was a widely accepted explanation. When ordinary physicians fled, towns desperate for order hired anyone who would stay. This created a profound social upheaval, with people abandoning friends and family, and funeral rites becoming perfunctory or stopping altogether. Some saw it as divine judgment, leading to frenzied religious rituals and self-flagellation. Enter the plague doctor, part physician, part notary, part last friend you would ever know. Contrary to popular legend, most plague doctors weren't mysterious monks or carnival hucksters. They were municipal employees, often contracted by city councils under formal agreements. These contracts were quite detailed, outlining pay, housing, and the crucial exclusive right to treat all plague patients within the city walls. For example, the city of Pavia in 1479 contracted Giovanni de Ventura, promising him a monthly salary of 30 florins, net of living expenses. The city of Orvieto hired Matteo Fu Angelo in 1348 for 4 times the normal doctor's rate. Some of these signatories were trained physicians who had studied at prestigious universities like Montpellier or Salerno. But far more were barber surgeons, skilled with a razor, who could shave a bishop or pull a tooth in the same 10 minutes. Barber surgeons were already accustomed to procedures involving cutting the skin, making them the go-to practitioners when physicians shied away from surgery. Many established doctors fled, making way for less experienced or even untrained individuals willing to take on the dangerous role. A few were penniless apothecaries who saw the plague as both a civic duty and a rare opportunity for steady work. Their common denominator was simple: they stayed when others ran. Personal journals kept by a Sienese doctor, Giovanni Di Marco, record the loneliness of that choice. My neighbors crossed themselves and shut windows as I passed. Yet every morning I tied the mask, for who else will count the dead? The iconic beaked costume we picture today didn't appear en masse until the 1619 outbreak in Paris, popularized by Charles Delorme, physician to King Louis XIII. Its roots, however, trace to the waxed linen gowns and herb-stuffed beaks, already improvised during the Black Death's first wave. The long overcoat, gloves, boots, and a wide-brimmed hat were designed to offer protection, often made of leather or waxed linen. The beak itself was filled with aromatic herbs like lavender, peppermint, or camphor, believed to filter out the miasma, or bad air thought to cause the disease. Imagine dawn in a plague-stricken Florence. Our composite doctor, let's call him Matteo, wakes in a rented room above the tannery, probably the only landlord reckless enough to house him. He dons goatskin gloves and a thick linen robe, perhaps soaked in vinegar, an early form of disinfection. Around his neck hangs a posy of dried lavender and myrrh, meant to ward off the noxious miasma. He walks the alleyways at first light, the silence heavy, punctuated only by the distant wails of mourners. He knocks on doors marked with a painted cross, a grim sign of sickness within. Inside, a teenage apprentice lies delirious, black swellings, buboes splitting the skin. Matteo, with a practiced hand, lances the buboes, a painful but common procedure aimed at draining the infected lymph nodes. He then applies a poultice, perhaps of pigeon entrails and crushed emeralds, utterly useless in reality, but the family needs to see motion, effort, hope. This act of care, however misguided, offered psychological comfort in an age of terror. Next, he visits a wool merchant who has paid in advance for a course of bleeding. With a scalpel still stained from yesterday's patients, Matteo opens a vein and collects cupfuls of dark blood in a pewter bowl. Bloodletting was a common practice, rooted in the humoral theory, which believed illness was caused by an imbalance of the four bodily fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Removing bad blood was thought to restore balance. Before leaving, he scribbles a will: 1 bolt of English cloth to the widow next door, 10 florins to the monks of San Miniato. Witnessing wills was a critical, if morbid, part of a plague doctor's duties. By dusk, he has seen 14 patients, eaten nothing, and scrubbed his hands only in cold well water. The exhaustion is bone deep. He records the tally: 7 likely to die, 4 already dead, in a vellum ledger that will later help city officials redraw parish boundaries and understand the scope of the devastation. Then he trudges home, the smell of death clinging to his clothes, unsure whether tomorrow's cough will be his own. The psychological toll of constant exposure to death and suffering was immense, leading to PTSD, survivor's guilt, and a profound sense of meaninglessness for many survivors. Plague doctors are the visible tip of a much larger, braver iceberg. Think about the gravediggers, nicknamed the Black Cart Men, who worked through night curfews, stacking bodies like firewood. They knew every splinter of infected nail or droplet of sputum could doom them. These were men who were often shunned, treated as if they were already dead, yet essential to preventing further spread of disease. They faced the grim task of burying hundreds, sometimes thousands, of bodies, often in mass graves, under immense pressure and with minimal protection. The stench of death clung to them, and some gravediggers reported being haunted by the smell, even in their sleep. Nuns in Avignon opened infirmary wards, brewed willow bark tea for fever, and sang psalms over the dying so that no one met their end in silence. Parish priests trudged from house to house offering last rites, often succumbing themselves. The Chronicle of Ely Cathedral lists 41 clergymen dead within 3 months, yet replacements stepped forward as soon as the ink dried. The church's reputation suffered as prayers seemed to go unanswered, leading to a decline in faith for some, but also spurring renewed fervor in others. Even marginal communities played their part. Records from 1349 show the Jewish physician Jacob da Tarragona granted safe passage by the city of Barcelona to share Arabic medical treatises on quarantine, even while other Spanish towns persecuted Jews as supposed poisoners. This persecution of Jewish communities, often blamed for poisoning wells, led to massacres across Europe. And beyond Europe, in the vibrant libraries of Timbuktu and Cairo, African and Arab scholars preserved and expanded upon Hippocratic texts. Figures like Ibn al-Nafis, a 14th century physician of Arab and possibly African descent, made significant contributions to medicine, including early descriptions of pulmonary circulation, influencing medical understanding for centuries to come. These scholars and healers, though geographically distant from the European Black Death, maintained a continuous thread of medical knowledge that would later guide European doctors toward more rational approaches. These names never merited marble busts, yet their collective stubbornness, compassion, and intellectual perseverance kept civilization breathing. So why did they cling to potions and bloodletting? Blame the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile, an idea entrenched for over a millennium. Symptoms like hot fever and dark buboes were read as an excess of blood, hence the lancet. Bloodletting, often performed by barber surgeons, was a widespread remedy, though it often weakened patients and risked spreading infection. The beak's aromatic herbs targeted the foul air believed to carry disease. In fact, the mask likely blocked some droplets, an accidental early form of personal protective equipment. These herbal remedies, like garlic, onion, and theriac, a complex herbal mixture, were common, though largely ineffective. Quarantine, one of the few truly effective tools, was a pragmatic response to observation. It was borrowed from Venice's 40-day isolation of ships, a practice first implemented in Ragusa, modern Dubrovnik, in 1377 with a 30-day isolation period, later extended to 40 days by Venice. The term quarantine itself comes from the Venetian quarantini, meaning 40 days. This practice, though not based on germ theory, proved effective in slowing the spread of the disease. Yet, even the failures had value. Doctors' meticulous death tallies gave later scholars the data to spot patterns, summer spikes, urban density effects, laying groundwork for modern epidemiology. The real therapy they offered, however, was presence. A hand held, a prayer whispered, a name recorded, small anchors in an ocean of panic and despair. Courage carried a heavy cost. Estimates suggest 30 to 40% of plague doctors perished, slightly better odds than the general populace, but grim enough. Survivors were often scarred by more than just physical ailments. Rome's municipal archive preserves a petition from 1351 in which Dr. Antonio di Foligno begs exemption from future service, citing visions of the dead who nightly reproach me for living this psychological trauma akin to PTSD was a widespread, though often unrecorded consequence for those who lived through the pandemic. Villages sometimes greeted returning doctors with bonfires of their clothes, fearing remnant infection, highlighting the social isolation and stigma these heroes faced. Yet their sacrifice mattered. By the plague's third wave in 1361, cities had refined response teams, rotating shifts, paid hazmat crews, rudimentary fever wards. The mask evolved from a spooky silhouette to a symbol of civic duty, appearing on 15th century Florence's municipal seals as an emblem of resilience. When later pandemics struck, cholera in 1854, influenza in 1918, and even COVID-19 in recent times, health authorities dusted off those medieval ledgers. They copied the quarantine playbook first, field-tested by men and women who had no idea what a germ was, but intuitively understood that staying still, isolating the sick, and showing up for others saved lives. The Black Death, despite its horror, spurred advancements in public health and a more empirical approach to medicine in Europe. Would you have had the courage to face death every single day, knowing your best remedy was a handful of herbs and a prayer? It's a sobering thought, isn't it? Tell me below what you admire or question about these incredible figures. If you'd like more forgotten stories that textbooks skipped, tap subscribe and share this video with a friend who thinks history is boring. Let's prove them wrong together. The Black Death killed millions, yes, but it also revealed an unbreakable thread of humanity. Plague doctors, gravediggers, nuns, priests, scholars, and countless nameless caregivers stepped into the darkness so that somewhere light might survive. Their science was flawed, their mortality grim, yet their example endures. In every nurse pulling double shifts, in every neighbor dropping groceries on a quarantine doorstep, in every quiet choice to stay when walking away would be easier. They remind us that heroism isn't always about winning. Sometimes it is simply about showing up.